Yes, good evening and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Welcome back to yet another live broadcast on your favorite football updates channel. It's a pleasure to be back on this beautiful Wednesday night slash evening with 20 minutes left to the top of the hour of 11 p.m. East African time. Meaning it's what probably 7:40 p.m. UK time and probably uh, 40 past midnight over there in India. So, anyways, thank you so much to all our usual suspects, people like LFC, people like Pedri, people like uh, you know, um, just for the laughs, and every single one of you that never misses to catch an episode of our live broadcasts in as far as uh, uh, football comes. And we do not take your love and support for granted. We do appreciate you a great deal for your continued love and support. Anyways, allow me have my audios tested and make sure everything does check out before we get into the conversation of tonight, where we will be speaking about, you know, the international break is finally over and league football is bound to return. We're going to be looking at what action will be when league football does return over the weekend. So we're going to be discussing that and much more in tonight's broadcast. I know a good number of people uh, do not appreciate the international break for really what it is. It's that kind of period that we sort of love to hate in a way. If I'm to use those exact words, some people like it, majority of football fans do not like it that much. And it's not to say that they have anything against their respective countries that do play during the international break. Nothing like that. It's just that we get to watch more club football than international football, so we get more accustomed to that, and we sort of pay allegiance to that. In a way, we are slaves to league football. In a way, for those of you that do follow it, as critically as many of us do. And when it comes to national team football, we prefer to, get really deeply involved when it comes to major tournaments like the Africa Cup of Nations, like the Euros, like the World Cup, Copa America, and things like that. So basically, for me, I would argue that it's understandable for certain fans or for a good section of fans to feel the way they do feel during the international break. Like I said, it's not an episode that they welcome one too often. It's a bit of it's that kind of thing that you have to get used to, even though you do not like it. Paul Pogba, what's wrong with Paul Pogba? What's the news on Paul Pogba? During the international break, it's easy to miss out on some key news. Things may slip through the cracks because there's that bit of divided attention on across sport when it comes to national team football, while trying to keep tabs on what's happening elsewhere at club level. The way we know that League One fans, for example, are not bothered about international team football. Paul Pogba is one of the few players that make me cry. Why? In what sense? Like, you do not like them that much, or you like them so much that when you watch them, they make you cry. Oh, Messi, Pogba, Pedri. Wow, what a combination that would be. I mean, Paul Pogba is that kind of figure that so many people like, by the way. So many people like him. So many people really like him. And if anything, his move to AC Monaco that saw Monaco make record shirt sales and also accumulate a huge followership on social media should tell you that. He did speak about his struggles when during the time when he was suspended for, I think it was suspended for 1.5 years for being found in breach of the anti-doping rules, something that he acknowledged that had happened, although not intentionally. He acknowledged to taking some supplements that then were found to have contained substances that were are not allowed. I think was it polonium or something like that. The elements that were found in the supplements that he took. So he's a very very loved figure in football, and I do not know. For Manchester United fans, he may be one that splits the fan base in terms of his during his spell at Manchester United. Some people loved him, some people like to pick on him. They thought he wasn't doing enough. And yet, in my personal view, is that they got a Paul Pogba from Juventus who was playing in totally different role and put him in a different role at Manchester United and expected the same success. So some players do thrive with systems, and again, the other thing I would put forward is that whenever he left Manchester United and went to the national team, the French national team, he was always successful. He was always having, a good games, match in, match out. You could hardly, pick on him that he had a bad day in office when he came to the French national team. Yet at Manchester United, there's so many days that you could call upon and say, he sort of underperformed in the last couple of games. So that's the nature of football. Unfortunately, as much as we wouldn't like it to happen that way, it can be cruel in that sense. So you have to be objective enough for you to sort of have discernment and to know that this time around, it's not the player that it's the environment surrounding the player that is sort of curtailing his overall performance, as opposed to what you think they should be able to deliver to you or to your team. So yeah, really. So like I said, like the headline puts it, finally the international break is over and we get to return to club football. What were our takeaways from the international, national team, international break? For starters, Uganda managed to win two of their games, managed to win all two of their games without conceding a goal, beating up against Mozambique by 4 goals to 0, and also putting two past Somalia. So they managed to score 6 goals in 2 games without conceding. That's not something that you usually get to see. We saw the unveiling of Jordan Obita in the Uganda current center back role. We saw the return of Dennis Masinda Onyango to the national team. We saw Salim Jamal Magola come in. We saw Sebik come in. He's a center back, but he was played at right back against Somalia. So then we saw another brilliant display of Alan Okello in as far as the national team was concerned. Then we saw the dramatic 3-2 victory for Senegal against DRC Congo yesterday, for which DRC Congo had led the game by 2 goals to 0. And then Senegal came from 2 goals down to win that game by 3 goals to 2 to leapfrog DRC in Group B to lead the pile with 18 points, while DRC sort of got themselves relegated to second place with 16 points. So those things we saw. Then we saw Norway put, I think, 11 past Moldova, is it? So during the international break, then we saw England register, I think, their biggest victory against Serbia under the charges of Thomas Tuchel. Yes, Serbia, I think, finished the game with a manless for Milinkovic, who received a red card for a foul on Hurricane. So, but all that notwithstanding, all that was part of the international break. We got to show the best of England under Thomas Tuchel. Declan Rice was thriving in that game. Of course, McGilly scoring from Declan Rice free kick. Then Hurricane scoring, Noni Madueke on the score sheet, Marcus Rashford on the score sheet. Then it was during this, Ezri Konsa also on the score sheet. It was during this international break that we saw Spain put 5-6, 6 plus Takier, Mikel Merino scoring a hat trick in that one, while Pedri scored a brace in that one. And I think the other goal scorer was who? Who was it? Was it 5? Was it 6? But anyway, whatever the goals were, but again, brilliant performances for some national teams. Portugal yesterday beating up against Hungary by 3 goals to 2, beat over a feisty game. We saw Italy beat up against Israel by 5-4. It wasn't a penalty shootout. It was just open play. So, all those results did come during the course of the international break. So, and those are some of our key takeaways from the international break as we saw it or as it came by. in some of the fixtures that we go to see on those different occasions. So there are some positives. There are some positives to take away as well, and some negatives depending on what side of the aisle that you did fall on. South Africa decided to take Nigeria to one of their stadiums that doesn't have the best of turfs, playing turfs, and they played them to a one-all draw. Those are some dark arts, or that's as bad as dark arts do come in the game of football. So you do have that, and we sort of appreciate it for what it is. That you do anything to give yourself the advantage, especially when you're the home team hosting that game. So really, you cannot. There's much that to appreciate about the international break that did transpire. Then quickly, like I said, for me, in a nutshell, that was the international break. Of course, there's so many things that many of you may have picked up on. Do not hesitate to let me know down in the comment section. Although some of my usual suspects, as I've come to learn the hard way, they prefer to remain in Kamoi. They prefer to remain in the ventilators, quite following the conversation religiously. But anyways, thank you so much for that as well. So, but like I said, of course, the wrap up of the international break means that then we are destined for a return of league football. And, that's Premier League, Spanish La Liga, Italian Serie A, German Bundesliga, Dutch LDVs, French League One, and everything league football or club football will be returning. So, allow us to kick things off with the Premier League because we do get into match day 4 on Saturday, 13th September, when Arsenal take on Nottingham Forest in the early kickoff at 2:30 p.m. So that game will come, and then we'll have a run of 5 fixtures, all kicking off at 5 p.m. For those of you that think you'll be spoiled for choice in regards to what game to watch, I would recommend that you keep your eyes on that game between FC Bournemouth and Brighton and Hove Albion. Then there will be another interesting fixture between Everton and Aston Villa at home. But in the other games, still at the same hour of kickoff, that's 5 p.m. East African time, you'll have Fulham take on Leeds, while Wolverhampton Wanderers will be away to Newcastle, and then Crystal Palace will entertain the a newly promoted Sunderland, who, by the way, have won, I think, 2 of their opening 3 games. So yeah. And then later on at 7:30 p.m., West Ham United will be up against Tottenham Hotspurs, while Chelsea will take on Brentford at 10 p.m. East African time. And then subsequently on Super Sunday, we will have the Manchester Derby. Hi, Football Royale. How are you doing? How have you been? You had disappeared for about what, 2 weeks or so? Is it school as well? Because for Pedri, school; for Safa Ali, school; for LFC, who is usually always here every single day, it's been school. For people like Pressing Kosi, people like Tester of Life, I do not know what's happened. People like Shmail, I do not know what's happened. What's keeping you guys away? I'm not sure what time you go live. Usually, tentatively, we go live every single day at 11 p.m. East African time. So that's around 9 p.m. UK time. Then every single morning around 9 a.m. That means 7 a.m. UK time. Sometimes it may be 9:30, which means 7:30, because sometimes I've made time adjustments to sort of try and suit certain audiences, depending on what people do join us in what segments, predominantly. So yeah, usually that's the time. But I hope everything is good or well with you, that whatever kept you away is nothing bad. Because sometimes when people disappear in our lives for a moment, usually they have their struggles at an individual level, or things that are bothering them. For some, if it's business, it's not going well. If it's work, they're having struggles or troubles there. It could be personal, a health issue. It could be family issues. But whatever it is, I hope you are all okay. So you say, how is Liverpool's transfers? Okay. So the early kickoff on Super Sunday will be between Burnley and Liverpool at 4 p.m. So how's Liverpool's transfers? I mean, personally, I did rank Liverpool as the team that had the best transfer window out of the big six. And by the big six, I mean Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Manchester United, Tottenham Hotspurs, and what's the other team? And Manchester City. That's the big six that I looked at, and I ranked that Liverpool had the best transfer window, managing to bring in to break their transfer record twice in the same window is no easy ask. Bringing in Florian Wirtz, bringing in Alexander Isak, bringing in Hugo Ekitike, Jeremy Frimpong, Milos Kakes, Georgi Mamadashvili, of course, Jovan Leoni. Really, that for me is a very decent transfer window. But they also did well when it came to moving on players in terms of bringing in some revenue. Kelleher left for Brentford, brought in revenue. Joel Quensha left for Bayer Leverkusen, brought in revenue. We know about Luis Diaz joining Bayern Munich, and then we know one too well about Ben Doak going to FC Bournemouth and those kinds of things. Of course, eventually to the detest of some or to the displeasure of some Liverpool fans, Harvey Elliott ended up leaving on a season-long loan to Aston Villa. But that notwithstanding, I thought they had a perfect transfer window. They are a good selling team. That I do agree with you. Although, if what's his name? Snow FC? No, not Snow FC. I forget his name, but he's a Liverpool fan. If they were here, probably they would disagree on the selling part. Anyways, that all notwithstanding, I thought they had the best transfer window. The net spend wasn't too bad. They made over £200 million plus in sales. Yeah, that's true. So I think they really did well. In number two, I put in Chelsea in regards to teams that had the best transfer window. Now, a lot of people disagreed with me on this one. And if you do have the time, you can always go to the channel. Under the video section, you will see my assessment on who had the best transfer window out of the big six, including me ranking my 12 best signings of the transfer window, some of which, of course, people went on to disagree with, among other videos that we put out there. But the reason as to why I put Chelsea in second place, because I thought Chelsea really did well when it came to moving on a lot of deadwood within their squad. Because sometimes the transfer window is not just about bringing in players that you think are needed in your squad. To balance the books, you ought to move some players on and for a good for good amounts of money. And that's where I thought Chelsea beat Arsenal in terms of who had the second best a transfer window out of the big six. So I put them above Arsenal, who Arsenal were really close to getting that second place. But I thought Chelsea, one, bringing in players like Joao Pedro, I mean, quite the revelation he's been. Not that we're surprised, but he's a very decent player. Liam Delap, never mind that he suffered that thigh injury that will keep him out for a period of 6 to 8 weeks. That notwithstanding, bringing in players like William Estavao, a brilliant signing. Of course, they managed to bring in Joel Hato from Ajax, bringing in what's his name, Dario Esugo, although this one had been signed in January. That notwithstanding, bringing in Alejandro Garnacho. He's not the best of signings, or it's not like they really needed him, but he's still a youngster. They managed to coup him for £40 million, and yet they were selling similar players in a similar profile for more than that. Joao Felix going to, I think, Al Nassr, and then Noni Madueke going to Arsenal. So among those. So when you look at their incomings and then their outgoings, I thought they did really well, especially with the outgoings. Now, for some, yes, they've sold to their sister club in Strasbourg because they are all under the ownership of Blueco. But that notwithstanding, when you move on players like Noni Madueke and bring in some good money, £52 million in total, add-ons included, when you move on Joao Felix, when you move on players like Nicholas Jackson, and we all know that was the desire. Players like Ben Chilwell, George Petrovic, the goalkeeper that went to join Bournemouth, and things like that. So they moved on a lot of players, really. And for me, they brought a lot of money into the club. Yes, for some, they took a hit in terms of making a loss on the player. But at the end of the day, you read some of those reports of players that were exiting Chelsea and at what fee they were exiting Chelsea, and you thought to myself, how did Chelsea manage to scam these guys to be able to convince them to sell to buy these players at this price? For example, players like Amando Broja going to Burnley, players like Leslie Wogochuku going to Burnley, players like Kanere Chukwemeka going to Borussia Dortmund. So those were significant departures. Of course, Marcus Bettinelli, the goalkeeper, leaving to join Manchester City. Kepa Arrizabalaga going to Arsenal for only £5 million. Yes, you may disagree that maybe Chelsea could have done better, but remember, this was a pre agreement between the player and the club to be let go at that price. When you look at players like Keenan Brisbane Hall, who has joined Everton, for a deal of about £25 million, guaranteed fees plus about £3 to £4 million in expected add-ons. So you look at all that. I looked at all that, and I thought to myself, that's a decent transfer window. You look at players like Christopher Nkunku joining AC Milan for about £36 million. So you really, really cannot disagree on what kind of business they did, especially when it comes to their outgoings. Could they have done better with their incomings? Yes, maybe they could have brought in a senior defender. Maybe they could have brought in a better goalkeeper who can be more consistent than Robert Sanchez. But I thought they had a good transfer window. You say the Premier League need to ban the 8 to 10 year contracts and ban Chelsea from doing transfers for the next transfer windows. What are they doing? What they are doing is going to destroy football. You do seem to think that way. I do not want to disagree with you entirely. There's a lot of people that think allowing Chelsea signing players onto 7-year contracts, 8-year contracts, 9-year contracts is a bit odd in itself. But also remember who Chelsea owners are. They are Americans who are accustomed to the business of asset management or and trading. They look at these players as assets, invest in this player 1 to 3 years, sell them for profits. That's basically what they're doing. And if you bring in a player and it's not working out, count your losses, move them on for a bit of a fair price where you do not take a very, very big margin of a hit and things like that. That's how they are operating. Look at how they are recycling players between Chelsea and Strasbourg. For example, Chelsea went to Strasbourg and signed Mamadou Sarr. That's the 19-year-old French centre back. But guess what? They ended up loaning him back to to the same site in Strasbourg. Then you have Ben Chilwell was sold to Strasbourg. There's another player that also joined Strasbourg. What's his name? Yes, Samuel Smith also joined Strasbourg for about £6.9 million, according to Sky Sports. Then Mike Penders, the goalkeeper, went to Strasbourg on loan. You talk of Julio Enciso. Yes, them signing Julio Enciso from Brighton and Hove Albion, and then taking him to Strasbourg with the view that he would be a Chelsea player because he's being signed under Bluco, and that kind of thing. So really, you look Mathis Amago, something like that. He joined Strasbourg still for an undisclosed fee. Kenneth Pierce, also joined Strasbourg on a season-long loan. So you can see this sort of intertrading between Chelsea and Strasbourg can come out to be a bit questionable. At the start of the transfer window, we knew too well that Chelsea were interested in signing a Strasbourg striker, Emmanuel Mega. I think eventually they made the resolution that he should stay at Strasbourg for another campaign, given that they are going to be, I think, featuring in the UEFA Conference League and things like that. So I do agree with you on that one, on certain aspects that in a way, but maybe we are disagreeing with it because it's never done before. But for example, look at a player like Mukalo Mudryk. Now, Mukalo Mudryk literally has I do not know the particulars of his contract, but if Chelsea are continuing to pay him while he remains under investigation, because the FA said they will be preferring charges against him for anti-doping, for being found in breach for anti-doping rules. But remember, he signed a 7.5-year contract or thereabout when he joined them in January 2023. So for him, he's covered. His weekly wages keep coming. and things like that. So on one side, you have a player that is covered with a very, very long-term contract, which, according to former West Bromwich Albion goalkeeper, that's Ben Foster, says it may sort of breed a bit of complacency within the player. And he made reference particularly that during that time, if you had signed a 4-year contract, after the first year, going into the second and third year, there was a bit of complacency, knowing that you're still covered contractually, and then maybe towards when you still have maybe 1.5 year contract left to it, that's when you sort of wake up and try to bring in the goods and things like that. You say they are beating FPP rules by giving them those long-term contracts. They are spending more money than they are earning. Yes, I mean, if because you do not want to break the rules, you end up navigating them, and that's what Chelsea have done. In any case, UEFA stepped in, and so, for example, when you look at the profit and sustainability rules of the Premier League, Chelsea are going to be caught up. And what did they do? They went and sold their female team for £200 million to a subsidiary of Bluecom. So literally sold to themselves for £200 million. Then they sold the two hotels at the stadium at Stamford Bridge for a total of £76 million, which, according to the Premier League, now the Premier League acknowledged those two transactions as revenues that came in. But when it came to UEFA disagreed with them. The UEFA disqualified those transactions, and that's how they ended up being sanctioned for about €31 million for being found in breach of the of the UEFA financial fair play rules, with an additional £30 million expected, €30 million should they not hit to an agreement of balancing out their squad, and that's why you had so many sales, from Chelsea, because particularly they wanted to try and abide by those rules or by the agreement that they do have with the UEFA, but they've been sanctioned. They were among the teams sanctioned: Chelsea, Barcelona, Aston Villa, Panathinaikos, Besiktas were some of the teams. I think Olympiacos could have been one of them. There were some of the teams that were sanctioned by UEFA, for being found in breach of the UEFA financial fair play rules. You said the women's team sale could be seen as money laundering. Well, I mean, a lot of transactions that Chelsea have done could be seen as money laundering, really, because usually we as fans, football followers, pundits, commenters, as whichever way you define yourself, we have been accustomed to clubs going into the transfer window, buying players that they need, whether it is to improve their squad depth, whether it is to replace players that have left the club or have had their contracts expire and they've not been renewed, or players that have retired, whichever way you define it. We have been accustomed to that. For example, if you're a Liverpool fan, you go into a transfer window knowing I need an attacking midfielder, so I need to sign, Florian Wirtz. I have two left wingers who are really, really in their prime, in Luis Diaz and Cody Gakpo. I'm willing to let go of one and then use that money to bring in a Hugo Ekitike. So you depart with one and try and do that squad balance. I've lost Alexander Trent-Arnold. I need to bring in a Jeremy Frimpong. I have Andy Robertson, who is 30 years of age. I need to bring in a 21-year-old Milos Kakes to sort of smoothen my way into transition when I'm transitioning from Andy Robertson to another young left back. So that kind of thing, Giovanni Lioni, the young Italian defender from Parma, we know that Ibrahim Konate has 1 year left for his current contract, while Virgil van Dijk is not growing any younger. So we are accustomed to that. It's about need, it's about necessity that clubs go into the transfer window for. And yet for Chelsea, it's not felt that way. When you look at many of their signings, you do question what problem were they solving in their squad. Let's give another example. Go to Arsenal. When Arsenal went into the transfer window this season, they knew that the goalkeeper, Neto, had left back to Bournemouth because he had been there on loan. So they signed Kepa Arrizabalaga. They lost Thomas Partey. They brought in Christian Nogard from Brentford. They knew that Jorginho had left. They brought in Martin Zubimendi. So you can see those are replacements. You've lost Jakub Kivio. You brought in Piero Higa. You knew you needed a backup for William Saliba. You bring in Christian Mosquera. You want a backup for Bukayo Saka. You bring in Noni Madueke. You knew you needed a striker. You bring in Victor Yokeres, but also bearing in mind that Gabriel Jesus has been out for 7-8 months nearly through injury. Kai Havertz is out injured at the moment. So you can see that for many of these clubs, even when you go to Manchester United, last season, they scored only 44 goals, conceded as many as 54. They knew that they should have scored more goals. And how do you get to score more goals? Bring in more forward players. Brani Mbeumo, Matthias Cunha, Benjamin Sesko. So you can see that all clubs do sign players based on assessment of needs and what they need to improve on in the squad. Even when you go and assess Manchester City, they've lost KDB, they brought in Tijani Reinders and things like that. You need an attacking midfielder, you bring in a Ryan Check, you lost Riyad Mahrez, somehow, somewhere you bring in a Jeremy Doku, whichever way you want to define it. You say the players that go to Chelsea do not think properly. They know that even though they are getting those long-term contracts and guaranteed money, they are eventually going to be sold. Mosquera is such a good buy. That I certainly agree with you on Mosquera being a very, very good buy. I mean, for a player that costs Arsenal a mere £13 million, that must be commendable business. If you can go on through that trajectory, then because particularly his performance in that game against Liverpool, never mind that Arsenal lost, reminded me of Rob Holding's performance against Chelsea, I think in the FA Cup final of 2017, when Arsenal beat up against Chelsea by 2-1. Rob Holding and Arsene Wenger, I remember him saying, I think in that press conference or the post-match press conference, saying, I'm sorry, it didn't cost £50 million. So, anyways, Christian Mosquera is a really, really brilliant buy for the Arsenal. But going back to your point about Chelsea, now, about the players, I for one, equally, I've also wondered, as a young player, what attracts you to join Chelsea when very well knowing that your chance of having regular team football, your chances are going to be limited. Take an example. A player like Alejandro Garnacho, refused to go to Bayern Munich or turn down an approach from Bayern Munich. Of course, even at Bayern Munich, he wouldn't have been a starter, but he turned that down to join Chelsea. Now, I would want to think that maybe he wants to stick it to Manchester United and sort of go to Chelsea and have this brilliant kind of spell that, shows Manchester United what they miss. But there's a lot of players that have gone to Chelsea, and you wonder, where are they going to play? When you play like Dario Esugo, when you know the club have Moises Caicedo, they have Romeo Lavia, where are you going to play? Andre Santos. Andre Santos was last season away to Strasbourg. Of course, there's Enzo Fernandez, there's Cole Palmer. Now, maybe for Andre Santos, you would think he's going to be a substitute for Enzo Fernandez. That's, a bit of thinkable. But for a player like Alejandro Garnacho, where's the playing time? I mean, you have players like Raheem Sterling, rotting down on the sidelines, just waiting to see after there are 2 years of remaining of the contract, because the team cannot accommodate them, not because they are not good enough really, but they can't find a place for them in the team. If you're a forward player, I mean, that's why Nicholas Jackson was so desperate to go to Bayern Munich with that as soon as that approach came in, because he knew, he knew. You say, see you, bro. I'll be back tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thank you so much, Football Royal, for your, submissions in this debate and expounding on our, discussion. Your time has not been taken for granted. So you look at some of those players at Chelsea and wonder to yourself, where on God's green earth is he going to play? So if you're Nicholas Jackson, they brought in Joao Pedro, Liam Delap, you've fallen behind the pecking order of Joao Pedro and Liam Delap. The writing is on the wall. Even Derek George had agreed to join Fulham, only that deal fell through at the last minute. It fell through at the last minute, but he wanted more consistent playing time, and he wasn't going to get that at Chelsea. Look at a player like Facundo Benanote. He's joined from Brighton and Hove Albion, and yet they can't even accommodate him in the UEFA Champions League squad. And yet, during his unveiling, he was saying that he is excited by the possibility of playing UEFA Champions League football at Chelsea during the modern season long. It's not going to happen for him. excuse me, maybe, and this is a big maybe it will happen for him during the second part of the season. After the first round of the UEFA Champions League during the league format phase. But is that going to be really the case? I'm not really convinced to believe so. So there's a lot you can leave to chance, but I just do not see it. I just do not see it. Anyways, that's it for the Premier League. And thank you so much, Football Royale, for your submissions. You really expounded on our debate. So, guys, allow us to move back to league football and see what there is to come more in as far as league football is concerned when it comes to the weekend. And we will be running off to the Spanish La Liga, where we will have games equally, I think about 4 games, 4 games on Saturday. When Getafe will be up against Real Oviedo, Real Sociedad will take on Real Madrid. The Getafe game will come at 3 p.m., while the game between Real Sociedad and Real Madrid will come at a quarter past 5 p.m. Then Athletic Bilbao will take on Deportivo Alves at 7:30 p.m., while Atletico de Madrid will be at home against Villarreal in the late kickoff of 10 p.m. In the German Bundesliga, Hoffenheim will take on Borussia Dortmund at 4:30 p.m., while Freiburg will be at home against Stuttgart, same kickoff time. Mainz will be up against RB Leipzig, while Union Berlin will be up against Hoffenheim. Wolfsburg will take on Cologne, while in the late kickoff at 7:30 p.m., Bayern Munich will be up against Hamburg SCV. Hamburg is where Arsenal trio, Albert Sambilo Konga, have joined, and Fabio Vieira, with Fabio Vieira joining them on a season-long road. In the Italian Serie A on Saturday, Cagliari will be up against Parma, while Juventus will take on Inter Milan. Big game for us this weekend. Of course, at the other game between Parma and Cagliari will come at 4 p.m. The game between Juventus and Inter will come at 7 p.m. At 9:45 p.m., Fiorentina will welcome Napoli. So those games are really there for the taking, and so many much action. And then on Super Sunday, I've already told you in the Premier League there will be the Manchester Derby kicking off at 6:30 p.m., while Liverpool will have come earlier on in action at about 4 p.m. When they take on Burnley. Then in the Spanish La Liga, still on Super Sunday, Celta Vigo will be at home against Girona, while Levante will take on Real Betis. Osasuna will be at home against Rayo Vallecano, while Barcelona will take on Valencia at 4 p.m. Beautiful game of football to look forward to. Then in the German Bundesliga, you'll have 2 games between St. Pauli and Augsburg at 4:30 p.m., while at 6:30 p.m., Borussia Mönchengladbach will take on Werder Bremen. In the Italian Serie A, you'll have as many as 5 fixtures are being played when AC Roma take on Torino at 1:30 p.m. At 4 sharp, Atlanta will be up against Lecce, as well as Pisa against Udinese, while Sassuolo will welcome Lazio at 7 p.m. And then at 9:45 p.m., Bologna will make the trip to San Siro to play AC Milan. So those are some of the fixtures that you ought to look to. In the French League One, PSG will be up against Lens, while Stade Rennes will take on Lyon. Strasbourg will be at home against Le Havre, while Metis will be at home against Angers, and then Lille will take on Toulouse. In some of those fixtures that you ought to look forward to. So yeah, the weekend does promise to really be action-packed. So plenty of action to come about. And we will get to digest those games starting tomorrow. We'll go deeper into what we expect that could happen during the course of the weekend and things like that, giving our respective previews for some of the selected games, particularly in the Premier League and things like that. Or else, do not miss out. Make sure you do not miss out on all that action. For those of you that have gone to the channel under the video section and watched our recent, publish videos in which we talk about the Uganda trends, the Uganda new Premier League format, where we get to talk about why Liverpool will win the Premier League title with Aldrin Yusufga Senior, why Ateta is the reason as to why Arsenal not winning titles, and things like that. Thank you so much for dedicating the time. Those who watched all the other content on the channel, we cannot take your love and support for granted. We really do appreciate you for what you have done for us dedicating that time. Anyways, allow me to send my shout outs to you, Football Real and Pedri, that have managed to chip in with comments tonight. I hope you're good. Thank you for making it worthwhile for us in as far as this broadcast is concerned. And yeah, thank you so much, Sarko's podcast, and every single one of you that for those of you that catch our broadcasts much later after they've been concluded. I would not take your love and support for granted. I really we do appreciate you a great deal. Anyways, what else? Anyways, have yourselves a blessed night and I'll see you guys soon. Bye bye for now.